Personality tests. From online quizzes to dating app profiles to job applications, these things show up everywhere. Sure, they can be entertaining, and thank God now I know that Alanis, Groot, and I share the same Myers-Briggs type. It's ironically accurate. But did you ever wonder where this collective fixation on personality typing started? Or how the business of personality tests grew from measuring lumps on your skull to an industry that pulls in more than $2 billion every year? Well, hold on to your Enneagrams, because we're taking on our obsession with personality types today on Everyday Awareness. Now, I'm no psychologist, so today we're just going to cover the basics. Where these things came from, how they became so popular, and how you can use them as a not-so-secret superpower, both at work and at home. Personality theory emerged all the way back in 300 BC, when Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, the guy with the oath, debuted his theory of personality, believing that human moods, behaviors, and emotions could be caused by the levels of certain bodily fluids in each of us. This was refined further by a physician named Galen, who theorized that there were between 4 and 9 major personality types. Now, of course, we've moved on from the belief that the amount of blood in your body determines your level of introversion. But this early system was adapted by many of the contributors to the development of what we now call psychology, including Kant, Jung, and even Catherine Cook Briggs, who published that Myers-Briggs type indicator all the way back in 1944. The next major development in our story comes along in the roaring 1820s, the decade that produced Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the internal combustion engine, the first photograph, and Phrenology, the science of determining personality and other mental traits by measuring the size and location of bumps on your skull. Now, while this was also fairly quickly disproven, Phrenology does make a really interesting contribution to our story. You see, it moved the study of personality from a philosophical concept to a scientific discipline. And because of this shift, within just a few decades, the new science of psychology would become a widely accepted reality. And then we hit World War I and the first widely used personality test. You see, the US Army had a theory that when people with a weak constitution face the challenges of war, their bodies shut down, and then they shut down. They called this shell shock. We call it PTSD. And Robert Sessions Woodworth, a professor at Columbia, saw it as a serious problem, writing that liability to shell shock was a handicap almost as serious as low intelligence. So, in an attempt to identify soldiers with this handicap, Woodworth developed 116 questions to determine a soldier's level of emotional instability. Score poorly enough, and you might not get sent to war. By the end of 1918, over 2 million of our soldiers, that's a third of the US Army, completed the first personality test. Alright, let's face it, these days nobody's taking the Woodworth test. So where do the ones that we use today come from? Well, not that much later. The Myers-Briggs, a test that 20% of the US population took last year, was first produced in 1944, so that women entering the workplace during World War II could identify the sort of jobs that would be most comfortable and effective for them. Less than a decade later, the DISC assessment was popularized, and shortly after that came the most widely scientifically accepted personality assessment, the 5-factor model, aka the Big Five. Now, hopefully you can see that each of these typing systems can trace its roots straight back through history. There's a surprisingly clear line from Woodworth in World War I all the way back to Hippocrates and his 4 temperaments. And then there's the big trendy one, currently grabbing 4 times more interest than any other typing system on Google and popping up all over your social media. It's the Enneagram. While the official test is one of our more recent, the Enneagram story is shockingly similar, with a deep history reaching back thousands of years, mid-century interest from psychologists, and a widely used test that continues to evolve with science and research. Now, obviously, we could spend hours exploring this topic, and we will. If you're interested, be sure and subscribe. But for today, let's wrap up with just a few ways that you can start to integrate personality types into your everyday. First, these tools work best when we leverage them as superpowers for self-awareness and discovery. If you're curious and want to understand your own conscious or unconscious patterns and motivations, taking a personality test like the Enneagram can be incredibly valuable. And once you're a Jedi Master, or at least a Padawan of your own personality, you can use your power for good in other ways, by building empathy and connection with the people in your life. For me, recognizing and owning my own conflict avoidant tendencies has been super illuminating, but I actually find it most valuable in relationship. Sharing my results with coworkers and being genuinely curious about what came back for them, well, it's allowed us to form deeper connections, to increase our empathy, and to see each other a little clearer. One last thing, this superpower can also be used in darker ways. Once we start categorizing, judging, or justifying people's actions based on their type, well, we've crossed a line into weaponizing and withdrawing rather than empathizing and connecting. So let's try and keep it above that line. So, what's your type? Are you a 3-wing 2, an INTJ? Do you know your top 5 strengths? If you do, what's one of the benefits you've gained from understanding your type? Drop a comment below. And if you're new and don't know your personality type just yet, you can find links to a bunch of those tests right down in the description. Stay tuned for more, and thanks for being here.